My new work has been released. Welcome everyone to read my work in tomato novel. I hope everyone can enjoy it. Your attention is the driving force behind my writing, and I will strive to tell every story well. Chapter 1. The Void World. You are listening at novelfull.audio. There is no sound or light, it is a silent place, and all one can understand is the feeling of falling to the ground or the floor. A young man with gray short hair and purple eyes recalls being on the brink of life. Am I already dead? He couldn't help but say these words, but his throat moved and he couldn't hear his own voice. Like an empty world. However, if it is emptiness, the existence of touch is strange. There is a feeling of heart beating, as well as physical pain felt in times of danger. Still a child, interesting, as if a sound was directly tapping his brain, he instinctively jumped up. "Who are you?" the boy shouted, but he couldn't hear his own voice either. "Don't panic, there is no sound here. If I rely on my thinking to speak, I can still hear it. It seems that we need to use our brains to speak, so is it appropriate to use the word listen?" The young man pondered. Suddenly, laughter rang out in the brain. It's really interesting to have such thinking in this situation. I make a living by making people worry, and you only realize now that I'm afraid. The boy used his brain to ponder the principle of that sound. "You'll adapt quickly," the owner of the voice chuckled proudly. "So, who are you, villager? What, in the game of a different world, others will call someone like me villager, eh?" Faced with the boy's humble reflection, the voice owner fell into contemplation. "My name is Reno Fur." When the owner of the voice was struggling with how to address him, the boy called himself Reno. "What kind of person are you?" Next, it was the boy's turn to ask. He didn't ask for his name, but asked about the other person's existence. It's indeed the turn of the question. The owner of the voice laughed again. "That's right, if you insist. I am the Demon King." The owner of the voice cast his words into the boy's brain with a majestic voice. The young man had a conversation with the Demon King, and was not surprised to ask the next question. "So, what's the matter with you?" the so-called Demon King, "looking for me?" Faced with a series of questions, the Demon King asked simply and firmly, "Is it in your eyes that the current Demon King is no longer enough to be afraid?" But he also realized another possibility, that the other party knew they were the Demon King, but did not change their attitude, and this young man's arrogance had exceeded his expectations. "Are you the one who needs my help? Me, what wish have you poured into the edge of life and death?" Upon hearing the words of the Demon King, Renaud recalled his memories from earlier. "Ah, I didn't make a wish. I just made up my mind to say, I want to kill all those bastards." "Bastard, the reincarnation of a different world," Renaud replied with a terrifying hatred in his eyes. "Why do you hate them so much?" On the other hand, if a stranger tramples on your land and steals your property without your consent, wouldn't you be angry? Renaud asked back and continued. "I can only let go of those bastards by personally eliminating them." Renaud gritted his teeth, his anger undisguised. The Demon King rejoices in Renaud's hatred towards negative emotions, which serve as an opportunity for his abilities to blossom and become a powerful force. "Since that's the case, you came to me in search of strength. You're such a lucky child. Wait a moment, if it's to gain your power, I don't need it." Reincarnations possess the ability to concretize despair, and they see the great changes in heaven and earth as ordinary things. Faced with all of this, Renaud refused the power of battle. "Can you defeat them solely based on your own abilities? Arrogance to the extreme is foolishness. I'm not saying I can win. Even if I get strength from you and can solve them, for now, I'm just a scumbag like them." Renaud firmly expressed that there was still no word "lose" in his eyes. A boy named Renaud, the Demon King pondered, does he have the ability to be just arrogant? Anyway, let's continue talking. "Renaud, what is your ability?" "I have never possessed any abilities, I am an incompetent person." The Demon King was surprised that the young man who claimed to be able to kill the reincarnation known as possessing divine power laughed and said he was an incompetent. The Demon King laughed and said, "It's really interesting. It's really interesting." After more than 1,000 years of waiting, the person who finally appeared was far below the imagined weakness, but possessed an arrogance beyond imagination. It is precisely because of this that the Demon King sneered, "Unfortunately, whether I give it or not, when you come here, you have your own abilities and are no longer powerless." "What, having the ability that belongs to you?" Upon hearing this sentence, Renaud searched for a sense of strangeness within his body, but could not find it. The so-called ability, also known as a skill, can be used and detailed by the person bestowed with it. However, Renaud has never gained such experience. The Demon King noticed Renaud's confusion and chuckled, "The one inside you is not a skill, and it has not been activated yet." "What does it mean?" "Let me tell you, don't worry for now. First of all, although you are worried that your abilities are what I have bestowed upon you, they are not what I have bestowed upon you, but what you have acquired yourself and should have possessed. I heard about gaining abilities in the future, but that usually refers to the stories of those who already have the ability to plunder and collect. This is inherited through different evolutions. Only those who have become my blood relatives and possess a certain level of willpower can reach here." Upon hearing the word blood-related, Renaud's expression became perplexed. Chapter 2. The Demon King's Ability. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I am not a descendant of the Demon King, and more importantly, I am just a human. The Demon King originally referred to the sudden appearance of the Demon King, which only appears once every hundreds of years. The most recent Demon King was eliminated by the brave 200 years ago. Although there are other monsters called Demon Kings, they are all monsters and humans cannot have a Demon King. I was sealed by 5 brave warriors 1,000 years ago. I am the Demon King of primitive humans. Sensing Renaud's thoughts, the Demon King replied. Although it may sound unbelievable, Renaud thought, "I see. The Demon King is just a respectful title. As long as someone with power claims to be the Demon King, they are the Demon King." "You are very sharp, Renaud. So what do you mean is that before being eliminated, you left offspring with a certain woman, and I am the offspring. Not only you, but also 1,000 years is enough to increase the number of descendants." That is to say, Renaud is not the only legitimate heir to abilities. So what? How can we activate our abilities? Do you really want to activate your abilities? Of course. Since it's something passed down, I will make full use of it. Renaud's eyes flashed with a strong light, as if urging the other party to tell him quickly. Firstly, I once possessed 7 abilities. I once possessed them, but now I have lost them. These despicable warriors have sealed my abilities one by one. I have kept 2, so you only have 2 inherited abilities. It has been sealed. Does that still exist somewhere? That's right. Somewhere in this world. One of them recently found out their location, while I don't know about the others. They may still be sealed or taken by my other descendants. Can I collect them? Of course not. Renaud nodded, indicating understanding. In his memory, he once heard in fairy tales a legend from 1,000 years ago. That Demon King was indeed a natural disaster. That's the power of this Demon King. If all of them are gathered, they should be able to fight against those reincarnations. Please tell me the triggering conditions and usage methods of your abilities. You are really impatient. It's not so much about triggering conditions, it's easier to say that the method of developing abilities only requires dedication. Dedication, yes. Devote the corresponding emotions. You inherit 2 things, arrogance and gluttony. These are the desires and emotions associated with the 7 deadly sins of humanity. Can you gain abilities by dedicating them? Yes. However, once you dedicate, those emotions within your body will also disappear. However, they are divided into 10 levels, and according to the amount of dedication, your abilities will also improve. For example, if you want to gain the power of binge eating, you just need to sacrifice your appetite. Devoting a little will only give you a little ability. Dedicating everything will give you tremendous power, at the cost of losing your appetite. Renaud smiled and pondered his abilities without hesitation. Give me both arrogance and gluttony. The next moment, words came to mind in his mind. Obtain. The destroyer of concepts. Obtain. Saturated rebel. After a moment of silence, Renaud felt that his body had not changed at all. Furthermore, there is no explanation of the ability. The Demon King chuckled. This is not a skill, skills need to be explored by oneself. Hello, it's not very good without explanation, is it? Don't worry. Although inheritors have different abilities, they are generally similar. Let me tell you. The concept breaker, as the name suggests, is an ability related to destruction. The saturated rebel is related to the ability to plunder and collect in gluttony. In my case, as long as you devour the opponent's breath, you can seize their skills. Although it may sound like an explanation, it is actually not explained clearly. Is this kind of service attitude not acceptable today? I'm not quite sure myself, said the Demon King confidently, I'm not quite sure. Renaud couldn't help but sigh. Forget it. Go and learn about it yourself in the future, that's all for abilities, use the rest as you like. I did it according to my own ideas. The silence between each other seemed to signal the end of the conversation, and Renaud's body emitted a faint glow. It's almost time, said the Demon King. This is a big service. Recently, I can determine the location of my abilities and teleport you nearby. Has the chat ended yet? I have conveyed everything that needs to be conveyed, what else should I say? Why not tell my story? The answer from the Demon King made Renaud chuckle lightly. Indeed, it is. If you continue to gather all your abilities, maybe we'll meet again. That's it for now, Renaud. Renaud's body shone for a while before disappearing. The Demon King laughed. One is the visitor who has been waiting, inheriting the abilities of the Demon King. The other is Renaud's endless arrogance towards the Demon King, that has never changed despite dedicating all of his arrogance. The disruptor of the concept. Finally. The young man thought to himself, always believing that the reincarnation was an unnecessary existence in the world. Heroes who have subdued great wars in the past, heroes who have defeated the Demon King, crazy kings who have plunged the world into terror, and heroes who have gained the strongest name. All of these may be reincarnations or some related existence, because the origins of those known as warriors are often unknown. The youth is pondering what the purpose of this world's existence is. Just if there are no reincarnations in the world, will the Demon King really rule the world? I don't think so. Because humans, non-human races, and animals other than monsters living in the world would not allow such things to happen. Although it is very powerful. But in the face of power, those who are powerless are the weak. However, the weak also have corresponding ways of fighting. The young man pondered, the world is. Chapter 3. Destruction. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the lush forest, a young man walks alone. The boy's name is Renaud, and he has short gray hair and purple eyes. Facing the Demon King who said, we can teleport you to the vicinity of the ability to determine your position, he did not conceal his anger and his expression became distorted. It's no wonder, after all, he has been walking for a whole 3 hours without a way to go, and the forest is the nest of monsters. Although he has acquired the ability, he still cannot understand how to use it. Without weapons and armor, without any belongings, in a desperate situation, anger is only natural. Studying one's own abilities is a difficult problem for someone like Renaud who has never used them before. However, through continuous walking, he at least made one discovery. 3 hours have passed and he doesn't feel hungry. Not only did he not feel hungry, but he even remained full until he began to complain. This guy is really good, Renaud smiled proudly. Due to being in the forest, food is not a problem, but being able to move without eating is fortunate for him. He is happy about his never-lost appetite because it has played a positive role to some extent. He not only gained the ability, but also came with privileges, which cannot be displeased. However, another kind of arrogance made him not quite understand. He did not feel that he had lost anything, and he never understood that destructive ability. Renault casually picked the grass growing under his feet to see. If his ability is to destroy, it is at least an ability to destroy things. He tried to experiment with his heart. In an instant, the broken grass in Renault's right hand cracked and made a popping sound. I see, Renault pondered. In other words, it is the ability to destroy upon contact with a target. Next, it depends on whether it is effective against living organisms. Another type of gluttony ability is called predatory by the Demon King, but there is currently no confirmed method. Just as he was pondering this question, human cries came from deep in the forest. Despair is everywhere. The men were facing a monster in the forest. That monster has red eyes and two thick horns protruding from its head, with black and hard body hair, and a body shape of over 2 meters. Two men, torn apart by its sharp claws, fell in front of the demon, one trembling weakly and the other motionless. This monster, known as the Pound Bear, is classified as level B and is capable of dealing with experienced adventurer teams. The team facing the Pound Bear is obviously a beginner. The two forwards have fallen, leaving only the archers using bows and arrows and the magicians holding worn-out staff. The last person didn't even hold a weapon. The man without weapons is the protected object. Luke Rudolph, who now feels very regretful. He understands that this team is a beginner and has heard of it from themselves. The purpose of this investigation is only for the sake of investigation, and they do not intend to go deep into the forest, so they arrogantly believe that there is no problem. But it turned out they were wrong, and they didn't expect to encounter a Pound Bear near the entrance of the forest. Mr. Rudolph, please escape, said the thin and weak wizard standing on Rudolph's right, his old staff clearly trembling. Rudolph shook his head and said, as an employer, I can't run away. Besides, they seem to be still alive. We need to find a way to escape together in front of this guy. Although he understood that it was impossible, Rudolph could never just focus on escaping on his own. Moreover, the two people who fell in front of the bears, although forwards, were defeated by the bears with a single blow because they lacked experience at the beginning. They acted too slowly when attacked, resulting in only minor injuries. However, both individuals were clearly unable to escape alone. His thoughts were involuntarily immersed in a bad direction. There is almost no room for thinking. For Pound Bears, they are just prey. There is no reason to wait. As a hunter, the joyful time has come to an end, and he takes a big step forward. Rudolph and his team are ready to face death. The Pound Bear raised its huge right arm, and the target was a magician who was originally a defender and also played a recovery role. Suddenly, he ran forward to protect the male archer. Hey! The giant body of the Pound Bear came before his eyes, and the archer shrank in fear. This is not what he expected. He plans to hunt down small monsters, accumulate experience, and eventually become a hero. At this moment, he saw a flash of memories, the impending moment. A stone hit the bear's side face. Although it did not cause any damage, the Pound Bear stared in the direction it was flying towards. There stood a boy with gray hair and purple eyes. Renault chuckled provocatively and said, "Come on." As a beast, the Pound Bear then turned to Renault, who was much smaller than himself. Renault turned his gaze to the confused wizard and said, "I'll steer it away. The wizard will find a way to help the other two people. You should have restorative magic, right? Archer, you're responsible for emergency treatment." After hearing Renault's words, the two of them came to their senses, and their primary concern was the lives of their fallen companions. When the magician started singing, the bear turned its head and looked over. Based on experience, it sensed what the magician was doing, but another stone hit its head. Although it did not cause any harm, it was frustrating as the beast's anger once again surpassed that of Renault. It strode towards Renault and raised its right arm. Renault placed his left palm facing the right arm. Does destruction have any effect on organisms? However, a chill hit his spine and Renaud jumped back. The pound bear's right hand plunged heavily into the ground. If he were there at this moment, he would definitely be completely defeated. That's too naive, that's right, even if he has the ability, he's just an ordinary person who hasn't received any exercise. He did not enhance his body's ability through magic. Chapter 4. First Battle. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The cold sweat on his forehead flowed down his cheeks, and the pound bear did not give any time to tidy up his body. Now Renaud can only use their slightly understood destruction and cannot even understand the content of their gluttony ability. However, even in this overwhelmingly unfavorable situation, Renaud still firmly believes in victory. Think Renaud's thoughts were in chaos, his brain rapidly spinning in despair and never giving up. The endless arrogance towards oneself, the inability to give up the focus of victory, and the fear of rejecting death all accelerate thinking. The Demon King said that Renaud maintained the ability to connect with it, which means he was able to restrain these two abilities in some way. That is to say, the abilities of arrogance and gluttony are very powerful. Although binge eating is now excluded because it has not yet been mastered, the power of destruction is not enough to be called strong. In other words, it is precisely because it has the ability to destroy life, that it exhibits strong value in something worth protecting. And when Renaud destroyed the grass he had touched, he also destroyed the grass he had not touched, indicating that as long as it is connected to it and that it is an object, it can be destroyed and to some extent controlled. Why did we come to this conclusion? If it can destroy everything, the Demon King only needs to destroy the ground to fight against the warriors. Even if the brave can fly, they cannot move, and all humans in the world will fall in a vertical direction. Although it is also possible not to do so, the likelihood of not being able to do so is much higher than what can be done. Destruction should have a limited distance. If one cannot master the ability and cannot control it, it will become an inconvenient and very useless ability. Is it worth sacrificing other abilities to protect it? Renaud formulates and simulates strategies in his mind. So far, the time spent thinking is about 2 seconds. The pound bear sorted out its body and took a step towards Renaud. Everything is a set of rules based on the exploration of possibilities. But that's enough. If you can't even risk your own life, then you can't confront the next desperate thing. Renaud quickly extended his right hand towards the ground before the bear approached, and the ground immediately cracked open. Then, the ground around which the bear and Renaud stood shattered into 4 squares. This is just a temporary trap, and the pound bear cannot cope with this sudden event, twisting its body and starting to fall. But the story did not end. Renaud jumped towards the pound bear, his goal being the unsuspecting right foot of the bear in the air, and he tightly grasped his hair. Destroy it, although the pound bear extended its worn-out claws to attack Renaud's right hand as it fell. But at the moment when it was about to touch, the pound bear's body cracked. With a faint growl, it softly shouted and then shattered. Due to gravity, Renaud fell about 4 meters from the trap he built himself. Ah! Renaud made a strange sound, but the damage he suffered was not serious. He lay on the ground looking at his right hand, stood up gently, filled with joy in the joy of victory. Great! His vision twisted. He understood that his whole body was losing strength and was familiar with this feeling. Ah, it turns out that he cursed his own ignorance. In the process of gradually blurring consciousness, only a man's heavy voice was heard shouting, "Is everything okay?" His voice reached Renaud's ears. In the room, Renaud smelled a faint and familiar fragrance. Upon hearing this voice, Renaud had thoughts in his heart. It was the voice of his dear mother. In his gradually fading consciousness, Renaud realized it was a kind of awakening, opened his eyes, and saw the wood-grain ceiling. He tried to sit up, but couldn't exert any force, only noticing himself lying on the soft bed. "Oh, are you awake?" Renaud turned his gaze towards the direction of the sound and saw a man with black and white hair sitting on a chair beside his bed. Do you understand the current situation? The man's words reminded Renaud of losing consciousness after defeating the pound bear. He nodded quietly. The man breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this. Great. So, let me introduce myself. I'm Luc Rudolph. I am Renaud. Mr. Renaud, you saved my life. Thank you very much. Please don't worry, it was voluntary. However, you sent me here, it was a great help. Thank you. Renaud thanked him, and Rudolph smiled and said, No, you're welcome. I won't let my benefactor ignore me. Also, regarding the reason for the fainting. Rudolph stuttered and couldn't say, but Renaud chuckled lightly. Is it because of hunger? Renaud cursed his childish thinking as he spoke. He mistakenly thought that he didn't need to eat to gain energy. As a living organism, activity requires corresponding energy. Illusions, misunderstandings, and fainting caused by exceeding activity limits. What a fool, sighed Renaud. Now let you eat something easy to digest, Rudolph said, leaving his seat and returning in a while. Wait for me all at once, Rudolph said with a smile as he sat back in his chair, and Renaud slowly sat up. By the way, Mr. Renaud. What are you doing alone in that place? Rudolph naturally asked the question. I was traveling, but got lost in the forest all night and woke up to find that all my luggage had been taken away. Renaud improvised a lie, but this common story should not arouse suspicion. Rudolph nodded as if without exception. I see, that's really unfortunate. Chapter 5. Loss of Appetite. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Afterwards, Rudolph told Renaud that the city he is currently in is called Hanover, and he is the mayor there. Renaud, who has determined the location, then raised his concern. Mr. Rudolph, why are you in that place? My purpose is to investigate. I am looking for the owner of that forest, master. About a year ago, low-level monsters appeared in the city. There are rumors that there was a master deep in the forest who chased after the expelled monsters, who came to the city in search of food. Renaud understood his meaning. Although I walked so far, I didn't encounter any monsters, perhaps because something drove them away. I see. Is this master also a demon? Well, it is said that those who have seen it say it is a humanoid beast. Renaud was lost in thought and said, Are your companions all lowly professions? Rudolph understood Renaud's meaning and showed an indescribable expression on his face. This is a small town on the border, where adventurers rarely stop, and knights only have some garrisons. This investigation was conducted by chance when I met them on their way to the capital and asked them to serve as guards. I didn't expect to encounter a pound bear in that place, which was considered a mistake. I see. Renaud nodded as someone knocked on the door. Please come in. Rudolph opened the door and a woman revealed her face. The food is ready. Oh, really? Thank you. Rudolph answered happily. Then, Renaud followed Rudolph into the dining table. In the center of the spacious room, there was a long table with 2 dishes placed beside it. Renaud is thinking, is there anyone else eating at this table? Rudolph seemed to have noticed and answered his question. Usually we eat together happily, but today everyone has already finished. After they sat down, the tempting aroma of the food made Renaud drool. Rudolph said, You should eat something good for your stomach. As expected, there were only foods on the table that were good for digestion. However, Renaud's stomach still felt full. Eat slowly. Eating too quickly is not good for your health. Thank you, then I'll start. Renaud ate it in a casual way and regretted it. He immediately felt intense nausea, not because it was unpleasant, but because he couldn't eat it at all. You can imagine the situation where food was stuck deep in his throat and couldn't be swallowed. Renaud's stomach sent out an unbearable signal, and he could only force water into it. Facing Renaud's sudden action, Rudolph frowned and said, Isn't it to his taste? No, don't mind, maybe it's because we haven't eaten for too long. This is a lie hastily fabricated by Renaud. Upon careful consideration, it's strange to say such absurd things, but Rudolph didn't mind and continued eating. Renaud regrets dedicating all his appetite to binge eating. Losing appetite, it turns out that eating has become pain. Is there anything more painful in life than this? Renaud absent-mindedly and slowly fed the food into his stomach. Otherwise, he would starve to death. Renaud felt remorse for his childish and ignorant behavior. When he was halfway through eating, he suddenly noticed a large portrait hanging on the wall. The person in the painting looks like Rudolph, but there are some differences. "Mr. Rudolph, what is that?" Renaud pointed to the painting, and Rudolph looked up at the portrait and said, "Oh, that's my brother Grimm." "No wonder you feel a bit like each other," Renaud chuckled lightly. Grimm. Grimm Rudolph. Do you know my younger brother? How could I not know him? He is the first person in the ecology of monsters. Rudolph smiled happily and said, "Yes, it's him." He seemed to really want to show off his younger brother. However, his expression suddenly became gloomy. "I would be happy to see someone like you who knows my younger brother. But I'm sorry, my younger brother is no longer here." "Sorry, it's okay. I'm glad to have someone who knows my younger brother, that's enough." Looking at Rudolph's sad smile, Renaud felt uneasy. "What's wrong? Why do you care? What's wrong with me?" Renaud didn't even understand, and his consciousness gradually sank into the ocean of thinking. "Mr. Rudolph, if possible, could you show me Grimm Rudolph's study? I've always wanted to see him." This is not a lie, but it is not entirely true. Just as a memory engraved in the books that Renaud read during his childhood, there is no special awareness of that person. "Well, all right. Let's have a good look. Grimm will also be very happy." Rudolph agreed without saying a word. After struggling to finish the remaining food, Renaud was immediately taken to Grimm's study. But before that, of course, he was asked to change into clean clothes because his clothes were very dirty. Grimm's study is well organized and very clean. The room is quite spacious, with a row of bookshelves on the wall, densely packed with books, all related to the ecology of monsters and animals. Renaud happily flipped through the books one after another, while Rudolph looked at him with a gentle smile. "Can I read here for a while?" "It's okay. Then, I want to thank you very much, so please come over to my room later and ask my servant to know the location of my room." "Well, I got it, I'll go over in a moment." Renaud nodded and Rudolph closed the door and left the room. Renaud immediately perked up his ears, waiting for Rudolph's footsteps to go away. Then he turned to the bookshelf instead of the table. He opened some drawers, but didn't see anything worth seeing. What he did was indeed somewhat despicable. In other words, did Rudolph trust people too much, which made him feel uneasy. After thinking for a moment, he looked at the bookshelf. What is this discomfort? While thinking, a sound came from outside the window. Chapter 6. The Owner of the Forest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Renaud approached the window and looked out. It looked like two servants were talking. "Lord Rudolph, what's wrong with him? It seems that we cannot abandon the investigation. Will they continue after suffering that kind of harm?" "I have said the same. But he didn't listen and said it was dangerous for monsters to come to the city." "It's really Lord Rudolph's style. By the way, how's the matter with the rope going? Are you saying that kind of sturdy rope with lead added?" "It was already delivered this morning." "What is that for?" "Let's catch the monsters." "For what?" The two of them slowly left the window, their voices gradually fading away and they could no longer be heard. "Capturing monsters. For what?" Renaud suddenly looked at the bookshelf. Grimm should be studying beastly magic. He chuckled lightly. "I see." Renaud left the study satisfied and prepared to go to Rudolph's room. He successfully found the room and knocked on the door. "Please come in." Upon hearing a knock on the door outside, Renaud opened the door and walked in. "Ah, it's you, I've been waiting for you." Rudolph sat on a chair deep in the room, reading. Regarding the matter of thanking you, before that, I have a question, Renaud interrupted him, and Rudolph frowned. What's the problem? Are you going to suppress or capture the owner of the forest? Rudolph was surprised. This problem suddenly arose without any foreshadowing, and the young man may have already noticed it. You. Rudolph changed from a surprised expression to a face full of sadness. You are such a smart child, indeed, the owner of the forest is Grimm, isn't it? Rudolph nodded strongly. Why can you perceive it? I accidentally heard the conversation between the servants and learned that you have placed a strong rope order. If we consider the safety of the town, it should be a campaign rather than hunting, right? That's true. However, it has many other uses. Renaud nodded in agreement and said, I have a strange feeling. Strange feeling? Why do you choose some novice adventurers? If you just want to suppress them, you can post commissions in the Guild of the Royal Capital, where there should be many first-class adventurers. A guild is the organizational structure of adventurers, responsible for coordinating work and assigning tasks to adventurers of different levels. In this situation, A-level adventurers should be suitable. Rudolph just nodded and urged Renaud to continue speaking. Although he is a border lord, if he lives in such a mansion and hires servants, he should have enough financial resources, right? This makes me feel strange. Are you choosing a beginner because you don't intend to kill him? Not only that. The owner of the forest appeared a year ago, and Grimm Rudolph went missing a year ago. What? Do you know about this? I saw it in the bookstore. After all, I used to be his fan, Rudolph said happily, and then replied, even the owner of the forest may not be Grimm, right? The rest is just my intuition. After all, Grimm is also a researcher of beastly magic, and I suspect he has violated taboos. Beast-like magic is essentially a kind of magic that transforms oneself into a beast-like form. Although it is a simple magic, it is not easy to fully understand the characteristics of transforming into a beast, otherwise a portion of humanity may be preserved halfway through. So, what are taboos? It is demonization. By transforming oneself into a demon, one can use the characteristics, magic, and abilities of the demon, which is a groundbreaking technology. However, the magic of monsters contains trace amounts of toxic gases that are harmful to humans. Because it is true magic rather than disguise, it will devour the spirit and turn both body and mind into monsters. Therefore, this is a prohibited taboo magic. Rudolph remained silent for a moment before whispering, intuition. That's right. Reno, you're right. Rudolph weakly affirmed, his expression twisted with pain. There used to be a pair of intimate brothers who had a gentle personality and became a man who could be considered the lord title inherited by their father. My younger brother is diligent and intelligent, and has become a renowned scholar. The two always get along well and will definitely help each other in times of difficulty. However, my younger brother cannot give up on one thing, which is the ecological essence of monsters. Although hailed as the first person, he often says that he has not fully understood the essence of monsters and expresses his desire to glimpse the life of monsters. The older brother expressed concern about his younger brother, but perhaps because he had learned about his thirst for knowledge since childhood, he did not delve into it. One night, my brother woke up and felt uneasy due to the sound of broken window glass, so he went to his brother's bedroom. There was a broken window and the entire floor was covered in magic circles, and my brother immediately understood what had happened. My brother feels remorseful for his foolishness and recklessness. We should communicate more with him and pay more attention to our younger brother. Despite his indelible emotions of regret, Rudolph remained calm. Violating taboos, even well-known scholars will be regarded as violators and caught. If you have bad luck, you may even be sentenced to death. Therefore, he chose to conceal the facts. He brought in some trusted people and dealt with it as a disappearance incident. Although he is a renowned scholar, he has been staying at home frequently lately, and this town is a border area, which has played a certain role, so it has not attracted much attention. From then on, masters appeared in the forest. Chapter 7. Capturing Demons. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. I waited for the river to calm down. Then, I picked up my sword. I thought the opportunity had finally arrived, but in that scene, a pound bear suddenly appeared, which was a bad situation caused by my mistake. After speaking, Rudolph lowered his head. If you publish a capture request, you need to give reasons. Generally speaking, the Lord will not publish a capture request. So you can hire adventurers as guards for prior investigation. Rudolph nodded, and Renaud also showed a sad expression. After the pound bear incident, the guild will also take action. At least there will be adventurers at level B or above taking action, yes. This is an undeniable fact. Moreover, even if captured, it cannot be restored to its original state. This is another reason why objectification is considered taboo. Both body and mind have become demonized and cannot be restored to their original state. Like beastly magic, releasing requires one's own will, but how can it be restored in a state of lack of will? Forced recovery is possible, but like transformation magic, it has one thing in common. Synchronization with the target. If the transformation is forcibly released, it will inevitably lead to some kind of mental illness. People who have experienced similar events in the past will eventually become useless and spend their entire lives staring at the void. Is this really considered helpful? Rudolph couldn't hide his disappointment. There is no other way but to give up. No, that's not the case. If there was a way to save it, what would you do? Regarding Renaud's questioning, Rudolph raised his head and asked, what? To be honest, this is a bet. If it fails, I will either kill Grimm or be killed by him in the battle. This was expected of Rudolph, and indeed, it was. In Renaud's eyes, a smile flickered, and a hint of darkness appeared in his purple eyes for an instant. Is it possible? I said it was a bet, right? Anyway, the guild has already taken action, and the cost of the challenge is also there. I think it's worth taking a gamble, Renaud sneered. This is both evil and tempting, and even a bit like a demon's whisper. Rudolph's mind was filled with complex emotions, but there was no other way. I want to try to believe what you say. This is a wish entrusted to my younger brother. That's settled. So, what needs to be prepared and manpower? Please help. The young man smiled brightly, but Rudolph's mind still lingered with the darkness in his eyes that he had just seen. The wild beasts are hungry, no matter how they search, they cannot find their prey. The wild beast that lost its thinking did not realize that it had eaten up all the creatures in the forest and destroyed the ecosystem. Hunger cannot be suppressed, to the extent that even the big trees growing there look like food. Despite being in the daytime, it still gets lost in the forest searching for food. At this moment, a pleasant aroma penetrated its nose. It immediately reacted and followed the scent, which was clearly the smell of meat. Following the scent came a young and petite boy with gray hair and purple eyes, looking very soft. Drool uncontrollably overflowed from the corners of the beast's mouth. Is it based on a bloody wolf? Said the boy. The appearance of the beast resembles that of a wolf, walking on 2 feet, covered in thick fur all over its body, with eyes as red as blood. The boy Renaud stared at the beast intently and slowly walked towards it. What's going on? Are you hungry? Renaud stopped, showing evil ridicule. The beast did not understand Renaud's words. However, it has been observing Renaud's magical power. Magic is basically judged by the opponent's magical power. The wild beast laughed proudly, and the young man's magical power was exceptionally weak. At this moment, the beast ran straight towards Renaud, as if he were a pitiful prey. The passers-by or other creatures that appear in the hunting ground will soon become something to feed it. However, the beast's claws could not reach Renaud, and its right foot instantly bounced backwards. Its body is upside down in the air, confusing people. The beast looked at its right foot and found a rope wrapped around it. Is it a trap? The beast cut the rope with its left paw and fell from behind to the ground, but was almost unharmed. When the beast was trying to stand up, its arms and feet were pulled in different directions. It struggled to escape, but couldn't move. Above the beast's head, Renaud giggled as he approached, saying, "The first-level adventurer is indeed wise, truly a forgery, who was lured by such a simple trap." The beast didn't listen and continued to struggle desperately, with the rope making a hissing sound. "Time is running out." Renaud glanced at the rope and then looked down at the beast. Renaud has been pondering. What is the capacity they can bear? The Demon King once said, "The abilities of carriers vary. The disruptor of concepts is the ability that Renaud bears." He understands that it is a destructive ability. However, what exactly does concept refer to? Although he understands the meaning of words, how can it be transformed into ability? After multiple investigations, he came up with a hypothesis. If the concept is composed of things in one's own mind, Renaud looked down at the beast while slowly extending his right hand. To avoid being bitten, he touched the right arm of the beast. He believes he can do it without any doubt. Renaud smiled gently at the beast and said, "Your brother is waiting. I will destroy all of this kind of thing." The entire body of the wild beast had cracks, and then it shattered with a creak, revealing a naked man. Although he was very thin and breathing lightly, he was still alive. Renaud was convinced that he had disrupted the concept of magic. Grim. Rudolph ran over from behind Renaud. The rope-bound Grimm's body was also released, and several people ran from all directions. Rudolph knelt next to the weak Grimm and picked up his body. Grimm. Great. Grimm. Rudolph held Grimm and cried loudly, ignoring wiping his tears. The men around him also remained silent, but they were crying. "Lord Rudolph, we must immediately take Lord Grimm back." A tearful man approached Rudolph and gently placed his hand on his shoulders. "Ah, yes, indeed." As the sentence began, others began to prepare to transport Grimm back. Rudolph held Grimm tightly and looked at Renaud. "Mr. Renaud, really, how can I thank you? Don't worry. I did it out of liking," said Renaud with a smile. Chapter 8. Negative Legacy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. That night, while Renaud was resting on the bed in his room, someone knocked on the door. "Here we go." With a response, the door opened and Rudolph walked in. "It's you. How is Grimm's situation?" "Malnutrition, but it is gradually recovering, and it seems that it should wake up in another 2 or 3 days." "Well, that's good," said Renaud as he sat up and Rudolph sat on a chair by the bed. "If there's anything I can do to thank you for, feel free to tell me," Rudolph said, and Renaud fell silent. "However, even if you can't think of it now, it's okay, Mr. Rudolph. Do you know the power of the Demon King being sealed?" Renaud interrupted the conversation, and Rudolph's expression froze in an instant. Renaud seemed to be searching for an answer, but only silence dominated the scene. "Well, it's okay if you don't know. No, I just feel surprised that a young child like you knows such an ancient legend." "Legend, do you know?" "But ask, I only know the power of being sealed." "Well, it is called the negative legacy." Renaud frowned at the unfamiliar word and said, "What is that?" "Have you heard of the story of the Demon King about 1,000 years ago?" "Well, a little bit." Under Renaud's answer, Rudolph showed a thoughtful expression. Then, he slowly began to tell. About 1,000 years ago, there was an undead Demon King, with overwhelming power to trigger natural disasters and earth changes. This Demon King committed many evil deeds and was ultimately defeated by 5 brave warriors. However, his power is too immense. Therefore, the brave ones cut their lives one by one to seal their power. One of the powers of the Demon King lies dormant on this land, which is a legend. That's it. Renaud involuntarily showed a somewhat excited reaction. Renaud, who suddenly woke up, pretended to be calm and asked, "Where is that?" Rudolph smiled softly and said, "Actually, it's right under your feet." "What? My family has been playing a role in protecting it for generations." "Is it the family of the brave?" Rudolph chuckled at Renaud, who frowned. "If that's the case, I might become a knight. However, because this happened 1,000 years ago, I am not sure about the details, I only know that my ancestors once served the brave. Renaud chimed in and pondered. I'm sorry to bother you, but could you please tell me if this is good for me? Renaud asked thoughtlessly, feeling a chill suddenly. This feeling is very familiar to him, and for those without power, it is a necessary feeling for survival. It is precisely because he can effectively suppress this feeling that he has been able to live to this day. A gloomy atmosphere emanated from Rudolph's gentle smile. May I ask a few questions? Ah, it's okay. Renaud lifted his knee slightly to be ready to move at any time and maintained a sitting position. Please answer honestly, who are you? Renaud pondered, should the truth be revealed. Don't underestimate adults, at least don't deceive me, child. Rudolph seemed to have noticed and revealed the clues behind it. I must gather that power. He avoided revealing his bloodline as the Demon King, but the lies were obvious. Therefore, he decided to minimize the information provided. For what? For myself. This is an answer that is not an answer, but Renaud believes Rudolph should be able to understand. Rudolph slowly pondered, as if chewing on the question. The last question. Are you evil? Rudolph's tone was very delicate, and Renaud realized that this question did not allow any disguise. Renaud closed his eyes, easily opened them, and looked straight at Rudolph. For me, there is no good or evil. I only have my inner. Goodwill and malice cannot be discussed casually, as they may change based on one's perspective. This is Renaud's own words, without any impurities. A few seconds of silence at the same time as Rudolph showed a thoughtful expression. It felt unusually long for Renaud. I don't know if it was due to mature thinking or other reasons, but Rudolph slowly spoke up, although I don't look like it, I have confidence in distinguishing people's hearts. From my perspective, no matter how you look, you don't look like a bad person. As he spoke, his expression also softened. However, I cannot easily hand over the things buried underground to you. After all, I am the guardian, Rudolph said naturally. I'm sorry, but since I know you're pursuing that thing, I can't keep you here. Please leave early tomorrow morning. I understand. Renaud nodded, feeling that everything he said was in vain. At least not being immediately driven away was already considered good. After confirming this, Rudolph stood up and walked towards the door. However, Rudolph suddenly stopped and said, "Oh, by the way. The security of this estate is very lax. If a thief comes in late tomorrow night, he might not even notice it." Rudolph deliberately said that. That is to say, if you really want it, you can come here and steal it. Renaud was somewhat amused by the owner's attitude. So, good night, Rudolph said again and left. In the quiet room, Renaud lay in bed. The negative legacy is the ability left by the Demon King. Although we know one of them, how should we find the rest? Perhaps it would be better to discuss with Rudolph, but we have missed the opportunity and cannot turn it back. No matter how much you think now, it's no use. Renaud closed his eyes and fell asleep. Chapter 9. Defense is very lax. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Renaud felt the scent of someone before the sun rose and woke up. He opened his eyes and looked around without seeing any figures. He slowly shifted his gaze and noticed something placed in the corner of the room. That is a backpack that only one person can carry, 2 folded papers, and 2 envelopes. Renaud picked up one of the envelopes. It reads, His Highness Guild Silver Snow Leonardo Fauci, on top, and, Mr. Renaud, please take a look at this letter first, on the other. Renaud opened the latter's envelope and unfolded the paper inside. Mr. Renaud, first of all, I apologize for my previous impoliteness. For some reason, I cannot fully help you, a person who has shown me great kindness. I am truly sorry. Moreover, I am grateful that you saved my brother Grimm. If given the opportunity, I would also like to express my gratitude in person. Time is limited, let's get straight to the main topic. First, I prepared 2 pieces of paper. One is a floor plan of the estate, indicating the entrance to the underground, and the other is a map of nearby towns. Although it takes about 3 days to walk, there is enough food and coins in my backpack for 5 days. Please make the most of it. Finally, regarding the certain reason mentioned above, I cannot write it here, please understand. At least, I am not your enemy. Perhaps Wang Du will have some information about what you are looking for. If it is Silver Snow Faki, he will provide you with help and you can visit him. To add, I'm really sorry for the way we parted ways. If you're going to have a conversation closer here in the future, you can also come and take a look at me. Luke Rudolph Renault folded the paper and put it back in the envelope, then opened the backpack. It contains well-preserved food and enough gold coins to last a month. Thank you, Mr. Rudolph, Renault whispered to himself. Renault left the estate before dawn. Intentionally discovered by a servant who had been active since the morning and conveyed the message, please remember me to Mr. Rudolph. After Renault left the town, he waited in the forest for the sun to set, and then began to invade the estate when the town quieted down. Although the defense was lax, he couldn't even feel the traces of the defenders. Renault suspected that he might have been fooled, but he still saw a small iron gate surrounded by flowers near the map markers, which had an ancient feeling with the ground. Renault picked up the rusty padlock, only to notice that it had already been opened. Is this really good? Renault muttered softly with a bitter smile. He took off the padlock and quietly opened the creaking door, revealing a staircase leading to the darkness underground in front of him. A hot and stuffy atmosphere rushed in, and Renault lit the makeshift torch he had been waiting for the sunset to make and began descending the stairs. I don't know how long he has been walking, but the endless staircase has been tempting him to walk down. When Renault felt tired, the stairs finally told him that it was the end. Approaching the passage ahead, it suddenly opened up. Renault looked around cautiously and walked forward. In the center of the room, there was a huge stone platform sitting on another book made of stone. As he approached, he saw those strange symbols. Is ancient writing. There is no need to deliberately set up defenses, as this is itself an unbreakable seal. To unravel it, it is necessary to analyze the stacked ancient texts and unravel them one by one. Moreover, if made wrong, the interpreter will be influenced by spells. A book that cannot be unraveled. Usually, there will always be a pattern. Even if the magic barrier is stacked multiple layers, as long as the pattern is discovered, it is possible to unravel. Just like water and oil cannot be mixed, magic rarely uses different patterns of arrangement. But after unraveling the initial pattern, the second answer was designed as the wrong answer. What a terrible trick! But Renault mocked and touched it. With the sound of shattering, a passage to the depths appeared, wide enough for one person to pass through. Renault is moving towards the channel and continuing to deepen. After a while, he noticed a blue light overflowing from the depths. As he approached, he noticed a blue glowing crystal suspended in the center of the same spacious space as before. Renault understands that it is the ability to be sealed. Hey, it's easy. He thought it would be more troublesome, but unexpectedly, it was easy to get it. Just as he stepped inside, a chill swept over his neck. Renault realized it was fear, and a blue glowing humanoid thing appeared in front of him. In an instant, Renault instinctively jumped back. The thing swung its glowing sword and instantly passed through the space where Renault was located. Renault didn't see it, just ran away with fear. He fell to the ground and remained stiff in place, but nothing happened. Renault realized that he had returned to the aisle and left the room. That is to say, only those who invade indoors will be captured by it. Renault was panting heavily, although he didn't exercise vigorously, he felt like he couldn't catch his breath, and the feeling of fear reminded him of bad memories. Damn it, the blue glowing thing stood upright like a guardian crystal, motionless like a mountain. Renault gazed at it, his eyes filled with fear. What should I do? The difference in strength is obvious. Invisible attacks are more difficult to touch than to see. Unable, impossible, negative thoughts swirled in his mind. Renaud looked at the palms of his hands. Even with the ability, this body is still so poor. What am I doing? Going on like this is just daydreaming. He clenched his fist, hit the ground hard, and stood up. Thinking, accelerating thinking. Then, he stared at the motionless thing. Chapter 10. Anger. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What I can do, I can move on my own. However, his hands trembled uncontrollably, awakened by terrifying memories and despair. The power is inferior to the mud, killing like a child's play, being kicked and ridiculed, and treated like garbage. Renaud is just one of them. Renaud remembered the unforgettable past, as he looked down at the trembling of his hands spreading throughout his body, fear dominating everything. No, you can't think that way. It's just a warrior's trembling. To sweep away the concrete despair, this is the first step, starting from here. Renaud pointed his right hand towards the glowing crystal. Then, he sneered maliciously, I don't know if it's the guardian or something, I'm sorry. I'm going to take it. In an instant, cracks appeared in the space. The cracks gradually expand, and as they approach the crystal, they make a sound of breaking. The blue humanoid thing did not move. When encountering incomprehensible things, people often cannot decide the next action, and the same goes for the thing that is created. Even if incomprehensible, the power to destroy space does not exist in the era that created it. The shattered space quickly regained calmness, and in order to make up for the lost space, the surrounding space was stretched. This also applies to objects, where Reynolds is instantly pulled and flies straight towards the crystal. Okay. As I thought. He grinned smugly, but everything turned into fear in an instant. Just as Renaud entered the room, that thing had already approached Renaud. The only moment that could be seen directly was that moment, and now Renaud was unpredictably about to be chopped down. The thing aimed at an immediately lethal area, and the most effective way to kill was to separate the head from the body. However, before its sword touched Renaud's neck, it made a shattering sound as soon as it touched the palm of its right hand. That's Renaud's intuition. If there is a mistake in intuition, it will be severely damaged. However, Renaud still believes in his intuition. However, due to taking an impossible position to confront, the body lost balance in the air. Renaud stared at the crystal, wanting to touch it. Finally reaching the limit of passing through point, just as he passed through the crystal, Renaud extended his left hand. When the middle finger touched the crystal, it turned into only light and was sucked into his body. Okay. However, the momentum of the flight did not stop, and he was thrown to the ground and rolled. When Renaud thought he had finally stopped, he immediately adjusted his posture to look for that thing. That thing has already approached him, attempting to wield the rebuilt sword. Just as Renaud thought he was going to die, his gaze suddenly darkened. After waiting for a few seconds, nothing happened, and this time he really thought he was dead. Oh, it's been a long time. I haven't seen you, Renaud. A familiar voice came from the darkness. Is it the Demon King? That's right, being able to live well is the most important thing. Renaud seems to have been knocked away again, but it feels different. This is that place. It can be said to be the spiritual world. The spiritual world. The person I am talking to now is not the Demon King you have seen before, but the remaining will entrusted in anger. Due to slight differences in the external world and time flow, you have not escaped the fate of death. After speaking, the Demon King chuckled happily. So, you're trying to teach me how to use it, right? Renaud immediately understood the meaning of the dialogue with the missing body. So, what emotions and abilities does anger offer? Will I die after the conversation ends? You are so calm, because I didn't understand my abilities very well. I almost died several times and got used to it. The Demon King laughed loudly. He laughed too much, and Renaud's face twisted. I really want to kill you, speak quickly, sorry, sorry. Anger is an emotion of anger, and ability basically means enhanced ability, angry. Renault thought for a moment and said, just give it half. Isn't it all? I realize that losing my appetite and losing something can also bring trouble. Moreover, if I lose forgiveness, my hatred towards them may not be reduced. Well, that's true. The Demon King murmured to himself and remained silent for a while. After a momentary pause, the text came to Renault's mind. Obtain. The pioneer of self-discipline. Renault smiled proudly and said, strengthening also includes oneself, right? Well, it also depends on specific abilities, but corresponding abilities can be obtained through names. I understand. Then let me go back quickly. You are such an impatient person. At least listen to some advice about collecting future abilities. What? Let's talk about it. You said you don't understand abilities, right? So, I suggest you look for greed. Greed, it is an ability related to understanding. Oh, I understand. That suits me very well. Renault nodded and laughed. Is there anything else? If I tell you everything, it won't be interesting. And if you're so impatient and don't chat with me anymore, I'll feel bored. Renault smiled helplessly and said, why are you so like that lonely and resentful woman who only keeps an empty room? That's okay, after all, I hardly have anyone to talk to. I understand. So, let's meet again when I gain greed. Looking forward to your performance. Alright, take care. Renault's vision instantly regained and a sword fell towards him. However, the sword cut by that thing swept through the air. This ability is good. It turned to the source of the sound and saw Renault standing by the room wall with a smile on his face, staring at his hand. Without any premonitions or reactions, the sword charged straight towards Renault. This move traversed the entire field of vision, but was blocked by something hard. It was Renault's right arm. The tip of the sword did not even penetrate his body by a millimeter and was stopped by his skin. Sure enough, can this also be done? Renault tentatively flicked his sword, and this time it was his turn to take action. With a strong flick, it shook for a moment, and he grabbed the part of its head with his left hand. Finally, touched. Goodbye, bastard. As soon as the words fell, its whole body cracked and shattered into debris. The blue light disappeared, and silence and darkness arrived. A few seconds later, only Renault's laughter echoed in the air, finally able to fight well. He rolled through the entrance, illuminating the corners and picking up the burning torch. Wong Du, he muttered to himself. Renault was also aware of the character Faki, although he only knew, not quite. However, there is something more important than this. There seems to be a summoner here. His expression became cunning, and his eyes became even darker than the darkness around him. First of all, the first person, Renault sneered. In order to truly start, Renault sneered. He cursed in the darkness at the pitiful hero, who had not yet appeared as the first.